one of my absolute pleasures to have as a friend, someone I met, geez, decades ago now, a few decades ago. We'll talk about that, but we'll please welcome to the stage Mr. Keith Kerwin, known as everyone in the industry as Stretch.
Cheers, folks. Hello.
So I can't remember exactly how we met, but we did end up doing a duo together for a while. And then after that, Stretch introduced me to his son Az, who played in my band. And Ange and I toured around with Az for quite some time. And but as a kid, I used to go to, like, I remember Manhattan's across from the Roxy, watching John English and the Foster Brothers play there. I remember seeing you play with Renee Gayer. Can't remember what venue that was. But mate, who were some of the, like, besides John and Renee, you had Marshall Hines, who else did you work with the Foster Brothers?
Oh, well, yes, the Foster Brothers with John English, Renee Gayer at one stage, sad, R.I.P., both of them. Doug Parkinson I worked with many, many times. Jeff St. John. I toured for a year with Norman Gunston, of all people. And many more, yeah, Marshall Hines. I go all the way back to, like, Cold Jaw and the bandstand kind of era. I backed Johnny O'Keefe back in, 1968 or something like that. So yeah.
So mate, you came, locally you had the Avengers.
Yeah.
Right? And what's the band before the Avengers?
Before the Avengers was the Capital Show Band, and I have Warren, the singer, over there in the corner.
In the white shirt over there, Warren.
Yeah.
So mate, what was the circuit like in those days? What was it like playing around Brizzy?
Well, very different to these days, the 60s starting out was there was these little, there was these places called the Bowl and the Scene and the Red Orb, and which was a blues club, and the St George Club, and all of that. Later on, it became more of, in the 70s, was the show band and residency kind of gig where you played 5-6 nights a week, at somewhere like Checkers or Whiskey Go-Go or the top of Lennon's, 30th floor of Lennon's was a gig, and the top of the State, which was then the SGIO building. And you had to make a living, so it was all about. It was a big training ground. You had to learn to kind of read charts, and the floor show acts came up from Melbourne and Sydney and everywhere else, and you got, if you were lucky, you got a rehearsal, but most of the time it was like them walking in with a book of charts and dropping them in front of you, and a talk through. So and you learned on the spot. Fortunately, most of them sang most of the same songs, but they'd be probably in different keys. I mean, every big ballad was My Way, and usually the introductory song would be something like, dun 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 dun. I've forgotten the name of the damn thing, but everybody did it. Or there was, I Got the Music in Me, and all of that stuff, and so and the other end of the stick was that the band. Like I played with a band called Everton Park at Checkers for a year or a couple of years, and then the top of Lennon's I was with a band called Kabisa, and it was all at the time the new Stevie Wonder songs and all of that world,
So mate, when you came out of that background, and I think you take this the right way, because I know people don't like comparing to other people, but a lot of my friends, when they talk about your guitar playing, it's like the Eric Clapton of Australia. You had that feel about your playing. And what was it that made you separate from like a club player doing the chart stuff to having such a really beautiful, unique style of your own.
Oh, well, thank you. I wasn't aware that
I'm not really, talk to most of my friends, they're like, oh, Stretch has that feel like Clapton. It's just so good.
Yeah, well, he was an idol, and all of that, and that kind of, I guess, emerged from the Red Orb, which was down near Centennial Park on the way into the valley. It was a basement gig, and it was a blues gig. That's what the gig was, and blues and soul. When I was working with Warren, we were in the Capitol Show Band. We were probably more labelled as a soul band. We had a fairly good keyboard player at the time who and it was like the Booker T and the MGs kind of world, and Sam and Dave and.
But what's the fee? Because you look at young players today. In our style of music, they've really got 5, 6, 7 decades to draw on that stuff. Back in the 60s and 70s, it was really just it was new. It
was all brand new.
Yeah,
there was no internet, of course, or anything like that. We got our news from the New Music Express, which came out 3 months later, and records came out months later. Or there was a shop near the corner of Queen and Edward Street called what was it called, Warren? The Record Bar or something. Record Market, yeah. And they had from memory, they had an upstairs section where you could get imports, and they'd bring them in within a couple of weeks, as opposed to months. I don't know what to say about my guitar style in the sense that we were just listening and learning and playing and absorbing everything I could. We could. I'll include everybody. I remember a revelation at the time for guitar players. There was a music shop near the Gabba called Ford's, and before that it was Parlings in Queen Street, and as guitar players we were struggling with the only talking technical for a minute. There weren't such things as guitar pedals or fuzz boxes or any of that stuff, so we had to. I remember the strings were always heavy gauge. We could only get these Gibson Sonomatics, and they were like 54 to 12 or something. Talking technical, that's the gauge of the string, and the thickness of them. And a 54 or a 56 is like a bass string, and but I remember seeing the Purple Hearts, a band called the Purple Hearts, and a great guitar player by the name of Lobby Lloyd, and I mentioned Ford's, and I got to meet Lobby at one stage. They used to have a jam session on Saturday afternoons. Excuse me, and talking to Lobby and having seen him play with the Purple Hearts and watching him and bending strings, and you go home and how the hell does this happen, Anyhow, I got to talk to him one day at this jam session in the basement of Ford's, and basically it was like, give me the secret, and he told me, well, you buy a set of Sonomatics, and you buy a banjo string, like a 9-gauge banjo string. You throw the bottom heavy E away, and you put the fifth string on the bass string, and then the top note you put the banjo string, and then all of a sudden we had light gauge strings. So wham, you could, bend the strings. You learnt.
I bet no one's told that story. Bet no one's told that story.
There you go. Yeah. Well, funnily enough, it has been told. I was just watching an interview with Hank Marvin of the Shadows just the other day, and he mentioned a similar thing, and I went, oh yeah, right.
So, mate, what took you then from playing that level with the clubs? I mean, along the way, I remember you saying you got stoned with Thorpe somewhere. Was that one?
Thanks.
Yeah,
that was later on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in a different circumstance. Yeah, but
what took you from like the club thing then to being in acts that were travelling Europe, travelling the world doing stuff? What was that transition?
Oh well, just having thought back on it. In some ways, I think I was a kind of a quiet guy, but I had more ambition than I actually realised within myself, And after a few years of playing those clubs and all of that, I have to rewind back a bit in the sense that I didn't really know what songwriting was. I was so involved in listening to Clapton and Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page and all of these, great guitar players and all of that, and George Harrison, of course, and the Beatles. The penny didn't quite drop for me that there was this songwriting thing, and when I was in the late 60s, when I was working with Warren and the Capital Show Band, and we played, you went through the whole gamut, we played mostly soul and all of that, and so the guitar influence at that stage was a guy called Steve Cropper, and we were doing these Booker T's and Booker T and the MG songs, and that was a cleaner sound and all of that. Later on, when I was with the Brisbane Avengers and they were encouraging us to write songs, and I was, kind of mixing with the guys from the Zoot and the Valentines and the Masters Apprentices, and they're coming out with, the Masters are coming out with 5-10 Man and Turn Your Radio Up and, ding 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 ding, I've forgotten it, it's an ad now, but the one. And that's the one, yeah. And, eventually the penny dropped, and I'd started noodling and all of that, and then while in this show band mode, I got to work with Doug Parkinson. He came back from England after working in a band called Fanny Adams, and as everybody went to England then, the Twilights and the Bee Gees and da-da-da-da-da. And the original song thing was coming out, and when I was in the Brisbane Avengers, they were encouraging us, and a couple of the guys in the band were working on it, but still the penny didn't drop for me. And then later on, I started noodling and what have you, and then the penny really dropped when I went to Melbourne. I was doing a tour with Doug Parkinson, and we finished the tour, and we finished in Melbourne. And at the time, I decided to stay there, and I was asked to join a band which was called Sanctuary, which was the Renee Gayer's backing band. Only this was without Renee, and they wanted to play their own jazz fusion instrumentals. Now, this involved a guy by the name of Barry Sullivan, or otherwise known as Big Goose, who was the bass player with Chain, right? And another fellow by the name of Mel Logan, and they came and approached me and said, "Hey, Stretch, I knew Barry Sullivan from the days of the Red Orb, when they all went to Melbourne, and in a band called the Bay City Union, which became Chain, and I'm in this pop group, bubblegum type of thing, called the Brisbane Avengers, and which I liked. I liked all the guys, but I had to leave. I couldn't handle the clothes. It was all chiffon pirate sleeves, and you know, and that whole look, you know, and the bubble had burst by that stage, you know. So we're jumping all over the place here. Come about 1977, I run into Barry Sullivan, Big Goose again, who says, "Come and join my band. We're playing all our own instrumentals. You're the guitar player, you're the singer, you write the vocal songs." You know, and I was like, "Oh, what?" And so that was I had a few songs up my sleeve, which I'd been noodling with, but this was serious, big time, you know. They were managed by Michael Gudinski and Mushroom and all of that world, and the like. So
Barry went on to play with LRB, didn't he? Like,
yes, yeah, and Mel, both of them, yeah, and so that was my first serious introduction to songwriting, and actually there's a live tape coming out soon, and anyhow, we'll talk about that another time. And it also introduced me to a lot of people, and I got a lot of encouragement to write, you know. And
did you write with John English? Did you write any tracks with John?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Which ones did you write with John?
With John, I wrote a song called "Given Time," which came out on his "Some People Have All the Fun" album, and I co-wrote another one with John called "Coming Up," and then there was a follow-up album called "Dark Horses." I wrote a song called "Treated Like a Lady," and another co-write with John called "I Can Do Better Than That."
I was a huge fan of Beating the Boards album.
Yeah.
They played over and over. And you spent a lot of time on the road, obviously, with John.
Yeah.
I remember you telling me that he wasn't a pretty picture first thing in the morning.
No, not if you wake him up and those eyes were like, ah. But anyhow, but he was a lovely bloke, you know. And so I wrote a couple more with John and for him. I wrote a half a dozen songs for Doug Parkinson. I wrote one for Renee Gayer. I've written some for local artists around here. Mind you, all album tracks. I've never written a hit. So I've never written a hit song, you know. But
having said that, the difference between a hit song and an album track is generally how the marketing is going at the time with the label and what they're focusing on. It's got nothing to do with the songs. There's so many good songwriters out there who've written great songs, but things just haven't fallen the right way. Mate, as far as like, you know, you've come through, seen the industry from a different time to where it is now, and we'll get you to play a couple of songs in a minute if that's all right, a few songs, but I just wanted to ask you, and one of the things as we do this, I want to get feedback from people who really were the founding fathers of the industry. I was pretty vocal through the COVID time of what's happened to our industry and all that stuff, but that's for me to talk about another time. Not really want to don't whinge about that. But where we are now, what do you see? Do you have any advice or thoughts on what we should be doing to help our industry to grow up and to kind of move forward from where it is now as far as the local industry here goes? That's a big question, but...
Yeah, oh man. Well, simply summed up, all I can sum it up is support live music, you know. as you folks are here today. And as far as fixing the industry or what have you, everything's against us in the sense of, well, it's all for us, but at the same time, it kind of works against us with all this streaming and all of that, and everything's so accessible, but it's not worth anything to, the days for some folks who had that luck, made enough money to buy a house, or something, maybe probably talking about the American market there. There's only a few in Australia that got to that point, probably the guys from InXS, probably Farnham, John English, and Marsha Hines and a few of them, but that was,
Most artists made a living.
It's the days of I was talking about before of the residencies. We only made a living, a weekly wage. It was good, The good times are good and the down times are terrible. You've got to go and hustle for another gig, and all of that stuff. But
so I guess thank you very much for your time talking about this stuff too.
Oh, pleasure.
I want to say personal thank you too for the inspiration. You were watching Wayne, I got to watch you play when you're doing your shows, and then get to work with you.
Yeah.
And then over the years when we've caught up and I know Angela say the same thing too. It's been really such great to know you. And mate, thank you for your time and doing this, and I hope it's been an interesting chat with everyone, and we just want to bring people like Stretch out of the closet, if you know what I mean, not that closet, and tell his stories.